exercises, and at least try to rotate through different muscle lengths. Hip extension movements are great. In a well-rounded program, they're going to be included. However, if you have to choose between knee flexion and hip extension, particularly for the hamstrings, you're going to be wanting to go more towards the knee flexion based movement. This is particularly important
keeping the torso from the knees upward in a rigid and straight position. Ask a buddy to apply pressure to the heels to ensure that the feet stay in contact with the ground throughout the exercise. Then resist forward falling for as long as possible, focusing on the eccentric contraction of the hamstrings. Buffer the fall with your hands, let the chest touch the ground and return to the starting position by pushing yourself up. In the wheel leg curl machine, we will use a different prone lying setup. Lying on a bench with one leg attached to the cable pulley, perform knee flexion in a concentric manner and return to the starting position with a controlled eccentric movement. Stand on a slightly inclined surface of about a 45-degree angle. The belt or strap is placed just above the knees. With the pelvis in anteversion, lean forward through engaging hip flexion, focusing on the eccentric contraction, and try to touch the floor with the hands. Return to the starting position available at our filming facility. We will use a standard cable pulley. To do this exercise, attach a strap above the ankle, which is then connected to the cable pulley. Lie in supine position with the legs facing away from the machine. Ask a buddy to block the free leg to prevent it from rising. The concentric phase of this exercise, so hip extension and slight knee extension, is done during the descending phase, and eccentric hip extension while the leg is lifted back up. Make sure to also emphasize core activation during the exercise.
Varus of the tibia, and to do that, what we're actually going to do is we're going to make sure that the foot is slightly wider than the actual hips. So if you can see from here, I've taken the foot out, it's slightly wider or slightly more lateral and abducted from the actual hip, and we're going to bring the heel towards the bottom, but when we return it, you can see that we're actually taking the heel and the foot slightly wider than the hips to create increased tension on the distal portion of the semimembranosus muscle and tendon.
Too high up, so they got a tippy toe out of the rack. That is just stupid ass shit. Set it at around chest height, upper chest height, so you just easily unrack the weight without having to go on your tippy toes. After you bless it, now you can squat. So we squat all the way down. Oh shit, the weight's going to be heavy. And you see it's only about 2 inches below where my lowest squat is. I can just sink down. Completely fine.
Begin the exercise standing with your front foot flat on the ground and your rear foot on a bench. Your front leg is going to be the working leg during the exercise, and your back leg will be utilized for balance. You can choose to have your rear foot flat or on its toes. Once in position, lower yourself into a deep lunge while keeping your chest up and making sure your knee does not pass your toes. Return to the starting position by pushing through the heel of your front foot while maintaining your balance with your rear foot. As you perform the exercise, the majority of your weight should be shifted to your front leg. You can choose to keep your arms by your sides or out in front of you to help with balance throughout the movement. With a closer foot stance, you're going to activate more of your quads. If you step forward, you're going to activate more glutes throughout the exercise. If this is your first time performing the exercise, you can place a pad on the ground to protect your knee from impact. Be sure to switch legs once you complete your set.
If you start all the way down or if you start at neutral, that's really it doesn't matter to me. Once you get them in the right starting position though, you're going to cue them stomach tight, butt tight, so you get hips extended, and then go ahead and come on up. So when you do it like this, it's a totally different exercise, and I think you're going to find it's a lot more effective. So whenever you're cueing your clients, make sure they keep the hips extended, stomach tight, butt tight, and then start to initiate that motion. Ideally, we keep a nice straight line between the knees, the hips, the shoulders, and the neck when they're coming up. So that's how you properly execute.
Tight grip, and you can even jiggle it as you're tightening it. Next, you're going to lay down, adjust the weight to a weight you can do. And what you want to do is put your arms in these pads. You want to make sure you maintain a neutral spine. Don't have your head down too much or up too high. And then you're going to make sure that your feet stay straight during the whole exercise. You don't want them to go out or to go in. And you're going to breathe out as you lift the weight up, because you always breathe out when you exert a force. So, breathe out. Come all the way down to the weights almost touch. Breathe back out. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in.
Traditionally, we'll have the leg in the neutral position, but what we're going to do is actually have the foot slightly narrower together, a little bit closer than the actual hip. So therefore, we're starting from an internal or medially. As we bring the foot up to the bottom, it's going to be coming slightly out. It's going back in, and it's going slightly out. Back in, slightly out. So the foot starts closer in and comes out, and we maintain that retroversion of the pelvis throughout the entire exercise.
Exercise is a dumbbell RDL. Now the reason I love dumbbells versus the bar is because you're able to control where the resistance is coming from. With just a barbell, the barbell is going to be in front of your body, and the furthest you can bring it back is along your shins. With dumbbells, you'll notice I'm running the dumbbell along the sides of the legs, and what this does is it helps further place focus on those hamstrings. Now with this, keep your back nice and flat, keep your chin tucked. That's going to help you keep that back flat. As soon as you allow your chin to come up or even look up, that is going to create an arch in the back. Weight goes through the heels, and keep those dumbbells right along the sides of the body. And as soon as you reach that full stretch, so just before you feel your back starting to round, pause just a second, and then focus on pulling with just the hamstrings. This is going to hit kind of a little bit higher up on the hamstrings, 4 sets of 10. To work your hip extension, a little bit of pelvic tilt, and a little bit of knee flexion. Now with the kettlebell swings, I like to go a little bit heavier, so start with 20 kilo and move up from there. This is an explosive movement. This is going to work those fast twitch muscles, and all you're doing is you're driving with your hips, your glutes, hamstrings, and only controlling the kettlebell with the upper body. So this movement is really awesome for developing that roundness. This exercise, you'll notice it's a very similar movement to the RDL, but we've got the weight across the traps rather than along the sides of the body. Now, with a good morning, this is an exercise that was developed for powerlifters back in the 60s or 70s, and is meant to strengthen the entire posterior chain. But the reason this exercise is so effective is that it trains the hamstring through that full range of motion, and it's to drive your weight through the heels, keep your back nice and flat, and as you bend at the hip, think about pushing your hips and glutes back and keeping a soft knee. So you don't want to bend the knee, but you also don't want to lock it out. And I would say 3 to 4 sets on the Smith machine. And the reason I love this exercise is that it's a little bit unconventional, and you are really going to feel that in the peak of your hamstring. And of course it's body weight. If this is too easy, feel free to add weight so you can hold weight right at your collarbone and make it just a little bit more difficult. Now with this, you're working with a limited range of motion because you've got the ground and you only want to come up to 180 degrees. So stop when your body is in a straight line. And when you get to that mid rep, so when your body's at 180 degrees, really squeeze those hamstrings and the glutes. And you're gonna work on 3 to 4 sets of 10 to 12. Bar is a little bit too tough on your ankles. Feel free to use a bar pad or a towel for your ankles. It's important to go nice and slow here. Keep that back nice and flat, and you can tuck your pelvis in just a little bit, and that'll help you get better hamstring recruitment, especially up at the top towards the glutes. Exercise. So the goal here is to work both sides evenly. There are a couple of things to really consider here. Keep that heel on the ground, so you don't want you want hardly no weight on your foot, and if you can just balance on your heel, that's great. Keep the heel close to the glute. Keep your hips square to the ground. Now, it's not uncommon for one hip to rise up higher than the other. Make sure they stay square. And make sure your free leg is not kicking up while you do it. So that free leg is just simply out of the way. You're keeping it nice and straight, and you're not aiding yourself with that free leg. And you should curl. This one is actually my favorite exercise for hamstring development. They've done quite a few studies on the Nordic curl and found that this is the #1 exercise for growing your hamstrings. Now, it's obviously a body weight exercise, and you can control the tension. And what I like to do here is keep the body nice and straight. So you don't want to bend at the hips at all. Everything should stay in line, and then try to hold yourself up as long as possible, and then put your hands out and pull yourself back up, in addition to pushing yourself back up with your hands. So you can make this exercise really easy by just blowing through it, or you can make it much more difficult by really going slow on that descent there. And because it's so much negative here, so your eccentric or your negative portion, which is this part here. Now here, one really key trick. Tilt your pelvis forward. You see how that flattened out the back? And what this is going to do is it's going to increase your muscle fiber recruitment like crazy. And make sure that you're tilting that pelvis forward, keeping your back absolutely flat. Almost think about rounding your back throughout. And this is going to work that middle part of the hamstring. This is your knee flexion part of the hamstring exercise, and it will hit a little bit behind the knee to the peak. So you're working on that lower part of the hamstring here. Go lighter when you do this, and make sure you keep your feet dorsiflexed. So you're going to keep your toes closer to your knees. You're not going to point your toes. And what this is going to do is it's going to help keep the calves out of the equation. So a lot of times when we point the toes, there's a little bit of calf recruitment here. And when you dorsiflex your feet, you're keeping them out of the equation. Give a little, feel what's going on. When it gets tough, make sure you're not using momentum. Make sure you keep that proper form. 4 sets of 10 to 12 here would be awesome.
Yell in a squat, touch the toes, come back. Squat, fully touch the toes, flex the legs straight and back. As many reps as you can. The hamstring heel curl. You're coming all the way in, all the way out. Push against your heels as you curl in, squeeze, and then come all the way back out. Try to elevate your butt off the ground. If you need a rest, take your butt onto the ground in between the rep and then come back in and push against those heels. Squeeze all the way out. Those hamstrings should be hit. Leg curl. One leg in front, one leg back, guys. You're curling up just like that. Squeeze it and hold it. Control. It's very important. This leg's forward and this leg's far back. get extra tension that way. Switch, alternating straight leg and deadlift. Touch, and switch legs. Woo! This is way harder than it looks, guys. My hamstrings are on fire. Try to keep that back leg relatively straight and as high as you can. Balance coming down, flex the hamstring. Woo! Squeeze the core for stability.
And then as I come up, I'm pulling through the glutes, through the hamstring. You can see the hamstring is a bicep muscle too. It's got its own bicep. It's got two parts and it will flex just like the bicep does. I come back out again. As I pull up, I'm not pushing on the ball. I'm actually pulling through the hamstring all the way to the top. Again, down, slow, and all the way up to the hamstring at the top. You can see the calves are getting involved as well. Here, up, pull, all the way to the top.
All right, now, very important, your back must always be straight. Never like this as you're going down, always like this. We're gonna give ourselves a slight bend in our knee. We're gonna allow ourselves to go down from our hips. Slow until our hamstrings are extending. Back up. Slowing the way down as our hamstrings are extending. Back up. Let's do it again. There. Back up.
When it comes to a straight leg deadlift, it's important to hinge at the hips. There should be no movement in your upper body, especially in your back. In a straight leg deadlift, it's important to keep your weight on your heels and press your booty back. Now there's so many ways to do this, whether that's holding onto a chair. Again, with this exercise, it's important to hinge at your hips, keep your core nice and tight again, and then once again, be sure to watch your neck and head placement. I would say a con to this exercise, bench and a mat to lay on. You don't even need to have a weight. Just doing my body weight gives me a good enough pull in my hammies, especially if I throw this exercise in after doing something like a straight leg deadlift. Your hammies are just gonna be on complete fire. And I really am, and even this exercise sometimes can make me feel just a smidgen awkward. I just feel like my butt and my hoo-ha is just ready for everybody to see. It also places a lot of pressure on your upper body because you're really just holding onto the bench for dear life as you try to curl a dumbbell with your feet. But the positive
wide stationary lunge. All right, so putting the easy bar curl up on my shoulders. I'm getting in a really wide stance, and the reason being is now I'm taking out all of my, as much as I can, my quads, and I'm focusing just on the hamstrings right here, okay? So I'm gonna drop down and push back up. Okay, I'm gonna blow, push some blood in there. Squeeze. 10, I'm not coming all the way up. I want you to really focus on keeping the chest lifted. 5 more, and it's pumping. Half and half. So we're gonna go to the bottom. Okay, I want you to give me 10 pumps right here at the bottom, halfway down. So it's almost thinking about right as you come down to the negative, you're just coming halfway up for 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, oh my gosh, and up. Now you're going the top part of the deadlift, okay, for 10, 9, think about the hamstrings, 8, 7, separate the hamstrings, stretch the muscle fibers, squeeze, 3, whoo, 2, feet are up. All right, heels on the ball, hands are flat. We're gonna go for 10, hip raise up and curl. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, keep those hips lifted. 3, so you really isolate the hamstrings. 2, and 1. Awesome. Is you're gonna do a pulse. Lay on your back. Feet are straight. And this one is excellent for those hamstrings here. And you're squeezing. Okay, this is gonna get a little contraction in the glutes as well. Turn your toes out, which helps you focus more on the hamstrings, and squeeze. Pulse it out. 15, 14.
Gonna look like. Make sure you get a nice pillow or cushion underneath your knees here. You're gonna anchor your feet to the wall, jamming those toes down into the floor. She's gonna fall forward as slow as she can, activating those hamstrings. There we go. She's gonna push herself up. Nice explosive push-up. slow down. As she comes back up, those hamstrings are going to re-engage, and then she's going to curl herself back in. Body straight, sticks its butt up in the air, and then goes out in an extended position. Crawl all the way out. Keep those legs straight, come all the way back in. Stand all the way up, yep. Do 2 more of those. Now notice she's keeping her legs straight and her arms as straight as possible. If you have a hard time keeping those hamstrings extended, bend forward. 2 more. Good, 1 more. Good. Obviously, you would want to make sure you do the other side. Hamstrings is first one is a quadruped single leg curl. You're going to get an all fours position to start. You're going to pick up one leg like you're doing a donkey kick, but now all you're doing is just simply curling that leg. It might be a little bit confusing, or it might even feel weird to start. Essentially, you're just keeping this leg as stable as possible, flexing that hamstring belly right there. Make sure your toes are pointed. That takes it off the gastroc, get those calves out of the equation. That's going to feel good if you do that correctly.
It's just like a regular lunge, but instead of stepping forward, you step back behind you, dropping down into that lunge position, then coming back up. Nice, slow, controlled motions. Make sure you get as low as you can to the ground. Barely touch that knee to the ground if you can. Then come right back up again. Tuck those heels in as close as is comfortable. Then you're going to press those hips straight up in the air. Nice, tight squeeze at the top. Make sure all of your weight is in your heels and up in your shoulders. Pressing those hips up. Nice, tight squeeze. Constantly feeling like you're kind of pulling those heels back towards your butt, towards your shoulders, to get those hamstrings to engage as much as possible. Lay flat on your stomach, curl those knees to about a 90-degree angle, then pull those thighs up off the ground as tight as you can. Squeeze into that butt, that lower back, and contracting that hamstring as tightly as you possibly can, keeping those heels pulled in. Just keep that motion going nice and slow. Tight squeeze the top of that range of motion. Remember, the main focus is trying to get those.
And lift, tummy tight. 2 more, lower. But you're going to bring one foot down and then lift the other leg up. Now I'm barefoot, you can do this in shoes, whatever works better for your body. You're going to engage your core. Inhale and lengthen down, reaching the opposite hand towards the floor, stretching and contracting the standing leg. And then exhale, come up, squeeze, knee into chest, tummy in tight. Inhale down and exhale up. Now again, you might want to, just because it's more comfortable on the neck, lift up, squeeze, and you're going to bring heel to butt, one side. Now if you can't lift up, you just leave the legs down and curl heel to butt this way. So depending on what your body responds to best. Now this one is tough, it does involve some upper body, so bonus exercise. So legs up into tabletop, you're gonna pull your body through, oh it's so good, and then lift your body up. Yeah, here we go. So I call these hamstring pull-throughs. And I'm sweating, so I hope you're sweating too, because, you know.
Moving at the knee, but if you have lagging lower hamstrings and or want to get full maximum size in those hamstrings, you've got to do the isolation movements too. That's what bodybuilders do. They know what they're doing when it comes to building muscle. So I'm going to show 2 options here. One is the seated leg curl option. If you have a leg curl machine, that's great. I do not, so I just have a band at home or anywhere option. Just hook into a power rack, tree, pull, any stable support structure, and I can hammer flexion. All right, where you want it the most, when the hamstring is really flexed and fully shortened and contracted. So this one is just a great way to, really go high repetition, good pump and burn, more metabolic stress to really build up those hamstrings, and even working in some isometric holds at the end range there. Movement 2, again, stimulus in that medium rep range, and then obviously endurance in the higher rep range. So I'm going to raise up, crunch the abs, squeeze the glutes, maintain that hip extension, pull through, squeeze. This one will just shock the hamstrings into growth. And if I had to pick one, I guess it would be this, because I can make it more progressive with the band tension than just my Achilles right on the pad or bench. And I'm going to push through, squeeze, lower and control. Abs stay crunch, ribs and shoulders down, and especially at the top, the higher I get, the more the hamstrings have to flex hard, the more the knees have to flex hard to kind of hold that position as you come through. So the feet elevated version works more ham tension and building those glutes and hams. So flat back, I'll put my hand in the small of my lower back to make sure I maintain a slight arc as I come through. I lower till I'm in a tabletop position, pull right through the hips. So almost all my weight, 80 to 90% of the weight's in that front leg. My back is flat, and I'm just going from tabletop to a stand. So I really felt that outer glute thigh stress there. And then I personally like to do this with a slight hip hinge. Some people say, oh no, you're cheating because you're hinging at the hips. But I actually, and there's other strength coaches that I know like Brett Contreras, Jay Ferrugia, who've mentioned this as well, where they actually feel more hamstring activation by doing this from a slight hip hinge. It also allows you to maintain better spinal mechanics. When a lot of people try to stay totally straight, they end up really hyperextending the low back and hanging on the low back, and you don't get as much hamstring recruitment. So yes, I could go totally straight, squeeze the glutes, rip shoulders down, and go more of an eccentric emphasis where I'm slowly going 5 to 10 second lowerings, slow, 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 and then I just assist with my upper body a little bit coming up. Great for sets of 5 reps with that slow 5 to 10 second lowering, or slight hinge at the hip, and now I can do more controlled repetition, and this way I really feel the hamstrings, but now I'm moving at both the knee and the hip, so I'm getting both high and low hamstrings working super hard in this movement. And at the hips, flat back, head in line with the spine, get a good stretch. We get a great vertical stretch with a landmine load, but again, I just like this as a really kind of autocorrects or hinging form, less stress on the back, and just hinge through. If you need a slight twist, kind of scoop through. Try to keep your hips and shoulders as square to the ground as you can, and just drive through the hip. It's my favorite landmine single leg hip hinge option. So good for means arms outside, and you notice how these handles are nice and neutral grip, which means I put my shoulder and spine in a safer position, and I'm going to get more outer hamstring in this because of the closer stance. So I just hip hinge, come right through. So I'm actually, you can see I'm pulling backwards to that top position. Nice good backward traction movement. So good to kind of change up the stimulus. I can do that also and switch positions and fade 80% of the weight now through that lead leg. A little more of a unilateral based movement while still maintaining to handle really heavy loads because I have a good stability.
Toes pointed forward in the back as well. And you're going to go straight down to the ground and come back up. You can either stay in one spot as long as your knees staying behind your toes, or
doing a hamstring stretch and making sure your foot is placed in a way so that it's straight up and down. Now why do that? Because a lot of times I see people doing hamstring stretch and they'll let their foot fall out to the side. So why is it important to keep that foot up? Well, the hamstrings and the calves are not just one big muscle. They're actually made up of a lot of smaller muscles. And what happens is if you let your foot fall out to the side, you put emphasis on only one part of the hamstring muscle or only one part of the calf. So if you do this repeatedly over and over again, what you end up with is an imbalance. An imbalance between the outside of the hamstrings and the inside of the hamstrings, or one side of the calf and the other side of the calf. So it really is important that you keep that foot nice up and down so that everything's in alignment. And this was one of the things.
Hamstrings, your semimembranosus and your semitendinosus are super tight. Then you start by stretching your medial hamstrings. So we need a towel to do exactly that. And we start with the left leg. So you wrap that towel around the ball of your left foot, and you make sure that you keep your left shoulder blade in contact with the ground. You lie on your back, and then you grab the towel as close to the foot as possible. And as you see me do it, move the leg away from the midline, in this case towards the left, moving it towards the ground, and at some point moving the heel towards the buttocks, but keeping the thigh elevated off the ground. And this is where we get deep into the belly of the muscle. Here, a second variation where you keep the knee rectangular, so a 90-degree angle between your thigh bone and your shin bones, and then you lift the thigh off the ground, inhalation off the ground, and exhale.
Get down on the floor, use a pad or something to keep your knees comfortable. And we're going to do a modification for another stretch called the goalie stretch, which some of you may have seen before on some of my other videos. So goalie stretch basically looks like this. You're on one knee and you got one foot way out to the side. Okay, so this tends to hit the adductors really, really well. Doesn't hit the medial hamstrings so well. Now, if we want to get the medial hamstrings, we want to make sure that we then turn the toes up, and then we're going to need to play around with our body position. So with the toes up, that's going to start putting the tension right in the area that we were talking about earlier. If I have the toes down, it's going to tend to keep that tension more so here rather than here, right? So toes down means we're hitting it here, toes up means we're hitting it here. Right? So that's how we can aim this stretch a little bit better towards medial hamstrings. Now, it doesn't have to be perfectly vertical. We can play around with the angle to see where the tension is. The upper body position as well. I'm doing this stretch the day after having done some squatting and deadlifting. It's only been about 12 hours since I did that. So I am actually feeling tension, which is why I need to be doing this stretch. So I'm just finding the spots where there's a little bit of resistance and then hanging out there. Now, if I want strings and fire them, contract, 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 and then relax and try to sink in further. So basically, using the muscles that are involved in the motion and getting the body used to controlling the leg position and the body position. You can search around. So if I walk forward a little bit more and then walk my hands over to the left, I can get a little bit of a different medial hamstring stretch.
Mention that we need to make sure we don't just drop this fully extended knee, straight leg up onto the elevated surface and lean forwards, because that burning you feel on the back of the knee, maybe even into the calf and the glutes, that's your sciatic nerve. That's not a hamstring stretch. So we start out lunge, elevated lunge position here up on the box, and we extend the knee gently, keeping the back straight to the point where we feel that in the main muscle belly, the back of the thigh. But from there, what we can do is we can work into external rotation and internal rotation. So let me show you. From here, if I rotate out into external rotation at the hip, so I'm turning the leg out, my hip stays square, my shoulder stays square, what I'm doing is I'm targeting semitendinosus and semimembranosus, the two medial hamstring muscles, and I can hold that 20 to 40 seconds if I want to do this as a static stretch. Equally, if I want to turn in, so internally rotate at the hip, again keeping the hip square, you're going to feel this more towards the outside of the back of the thigh. We've got biceps femoris getting more of a stretch here. Internally rotate, step through. There, externally rotate, internally rotate, and step through. And again, external, internal. So we can turn that.
And slowly extend, okay? So the first one, you're not going to be able to get full range, but as you go through this, you're going to do 10 reps on each leg. So hinge, 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 and hopefully you can get your hands to just below your patella here, okay? So I'm down here now, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the tibia, the lower legs right there. Don't let it move, and then I'm going to straighten the knees using the quads. Really contract the quads tight, and then come up from there, okay? Standing tall, I can get my leg straight just above that. So that's perfect for me. So I'm just going to lift it on there. So first things first, we're going to get in there, get relaxed, make sure I'm aligned here so everything's straight, hips not hiked. Support leg is straight, okay? And then I'm going to lift this leg to start, contract, 5 seconds, and then relax down into the stretch for 5 seconds. And then I'm going to drive my heel down. Think about trying to bend my knee. That's how I'm going to activate the hamstring the best there. For 5 seconds, and then I'm going to relax for 5 seconds.
So you're going to put your foot right up against it so the heel is jammed up against the wall or pretty close to, and the toes are pushed back. So this basically puts us and locks us into dorsiflexion of the ankle. Again, I'm holding onto this guy right here. I'm going into this stretch totally cold. This is the first take on this stretch. I haven't done this morning, and I'm really tight from doing deadlifting, so you're going to see how rough this is going to be. So as I turn, as I get the foot locked in, I'm going to do a little turn, and I'm going to try to get my hips so that they are at least square to the wall, meaning my left hip and my right hip are equidistant, right? The same distance from the wall here. And I'm going to try to even go further than that, so my left hip is now even closer to the wall than my right hip. This is making me twist all the way this way. Twisting your upper body also helps get you deeper into this stretch. So once you're here, you're probably going to be feeling a ton of stretch going down the lateral hamstrings. Some of you may not even be able to twist this much or be leaned forward this much, right? Some of you may be here and just find it difficult to even get a little bit of a twist. That's fine. That's fine for you. Now, if you're starting to stretch off and you already feel like the calves are what's stopping you, then you don't get to do it like this. You're going to back out, okay? You're just going to be here, let the toes point, and then do the twist and try to aim that stretch into the hamstrings. If you find that that still doesn't do it, and then you still feel calf stuff, you may need to bend the knee a little bit, just a smidge, so that you can aim the stretch a little bit higher into the belly of the hamstring muscles. Foot up against the wall. We've got that twist. We're all good here. And then we're going to start going forward into this stretch. Still trying to keep the hips twisted, still trying to angle that way. We're going to try to get down, 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 down into it. Now, I'm hitting a pretty noticeable stiff point here. So when we hit these points, we can start using contract, relax to help us out. So there's a number of ways we can do this. One is to try to use the hamstrings and push the heel down into the floor, which I'm doing now. I'm feeling the hamstrings work, and it's uncomfortable. And one sensation you may get while doing this is that you can't really tell what you're using. One of my clients referred to this as a murky feeling, like it's just like you can't tell what muscles are supposed to be doing what they're doing. And then you relax. So you're just counting to 3 on these contractions. You go 1, 2, 3, and then relax. 1, 2, 3, and then relax. Opposite way, I'm using my hand to create resistance. It's as if I'm trying to lift the leg up. A lot of you will not be able to do that because of your hamstrings, and that's okay. But I'm going to push down, and I'm going to try to lift up, lift up, lift up, and then relax. And then I'll do it again, lift up, lift up, lift up, and then do it again. So that's another one that sometimes people find helpful. It's like you're trying to gas pedal into the wall, and that actually you'll feel hamstrings help stabilize the hip joint as you do that. So that's a contraction you can work into this.
So you grab the towel, pull it very close to the foot, and then move the leg diagonal towards the right side. You make sure that you grab the towel with the opposite hand, with the opposite arm, and you keep the right shoulder, in this case, on the ground. The left palm is facing up, and you want to breathe through the leg. Let's do the other side, lifting towards the ground. Keep your leg straight and keep your elbows straight, and then you move that leg, pull that leg towards the left side, so towards the opposite direction, making sure that the left shoulder moves away from.
Simply kick your foot up outside the opposite side hand. Straight away here, if you're doing this without sticking your butt in the air, but you're keeping your hips nice and low, you should feel right the way down the outside of the hip there, you're getting a good stretch. From there, very simply, take same side hand up to the sky. Hold that for a moment and down. Across to the other side. You see that it's not a perfectly straight.
Which is the lateral hamstring. We're going to reach across the body towards the outside of the foot or shin. This motion will move the stretch from the inner part of the hamstring to the lateral outer part of the hamstrings.
reciprocal inhibition reflex. That is, quadricep is inhibiting hamstring here as I extend the knee, and the reason for holding the body onto the leg is to reduce the apprehension reflex, that fear dimension. Now in this position here, two contractions are possible. One, I'm going to try and pull the heel of this foot here back to the bottom and use the slidey thing to extend the leg, again using quadriceps as before, as we did in the lunge version, because using quadriceps to slide the foot out inhibits the hamstring slightly. So with a good grip on my foot,
on your toes, not way back on your arch, but on the ball of your foot there. And what you're going to do is you're going to straighten out your leg. Now this one, you want your knee to always be straight. If it starts bending, then bring your leg back down a little bit. And what you're going to do is you're going to start pulling your leg up until you feel that hamstring stretch. Now again,
downward pressure on my femur with my opposing hand, kind of lift your body up and just roll up and down the lateral hamstrings, coming up really close. This is my knee right here, like stopping just above the knee, really getting into those like attachment sites in here. So like roll up and down 30 times or so, spend extra time on the extra tight areas and kind of, you know, oscillate in and out, and that's pretty much it.
A crossball here, just put it right underneath and fairly close to the sit bone there. Pretty tender in there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to get warmed up first. Just moving around a little bit, not putting too much pressure on the area. Is that pretty intense in there?
Yes.
Really intense. Okay, why don't you move the ball a little bit forward there from that point there. Okay, a little bit easier there?
A lot easier.
All right, good, good. Okay, now you're going to find an area where you feel there's a restriction. And then you're going to put a little bit of compression on that area and kind of hold it for a second. Okay. You feel that there?
Yeah.
Yeah, it starts to increase quite a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It does. Okay, when you held that for, you know, maybe 10 seconds or so, you're going to start doing some shear work. But while you're holding that position, you want to make sure that you're taking deep, slow breaths. And this will relax all the muscles in the surrounding area. It will make you what we call parasympathetic. Dynamically about 5 times. Take it out there. Again, slow, deep breaths. How's that feeling?
That's tender when it's
really tender, okay. Don't push it too far first there.
Your face, your neck, and your jaw. That's really nice. I love this technique. It's really relaxing, even though it's slightly painful. And we'll go to the adductor next. So you're going to bring the ball in the inner thigh and the groin.
So, come on here like this. Now what we're going to do is, normally you're sitting on the floor, you're rolling, but we're not feeling too much. Here we can do is we can grab our edge of our surface here, grab the other edge of the surface, pull down, find that spot right there, and then what you can do is this. As your quadriceps are contracting, your hamstrings are lengthening, right? But as this lengthening, pressure is being applied, right? So that's how we're going to, if you find out that, okay, that's not really feeling too much for me, we can do here is still roll back and forth, pulling down. There we go. And as you're same position for the roller. Okay, we got a kettlebell here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to first position myself on top of the roller. Bring resistance nice and close. Here. And on the roller. And you'll find that this is also very effective. You don't have a kettlebell? No problem. Use a bag of flour. Have somebody else.
Hey. Sit on.
This is a common technique that is shown in most gyms and clinical practices. Just place the foam roller at the back of your hamstrings and have your knee extended. Cross your other foot over that knee. This adds pressure on
more upper body strength. I can hold myself up and then I can move back and forth along the hamstring muscles just like this. If you need something a little bit more intense than that, you can do one leg at a time by crossing one leg over the other. So now all of that weight is all on that left hamstring as I'm rolling.
Right.
to get your hamstrings in the mood. Step 3. Squeeze your hamstrings with both hands, beginning just above the knee and moving up towards your seat. Rest your feet on the ground to allow your hamstrings to relax. Step 4. Using both hands, press and roll your fingertips into your hamstrings. Begin near your knee and move towards your glutes. Look for tender spots. Keep working them until you've had enough. Move the ball gradually